Morbius is a film directed by Daniel Espinosa, starring Jared Leto as the character of Michael Morbius, who from his childhood suffered from a terrible blood disease that was expected to shorten his lifespan significantly, and he grew up to become a very innovative and very intelligent doctor who was not only able to find a formula for artificial blood that saved tons of lives, but he also in his adulthood managed to find a cure for the blood disease he was suffering from, along with what his best friend was suffering from as well. And as he uses this cure, which was arguably very unethical and very complex logistically to use, he finds out that he is becoming a monster. And he is doing horrible things to people, such as killing them for no apparent reason or even just committing acts of pure chaos. He also has his best friend who's trying to get in on this cure to be able to prolong his life, like anyone would, of course. But the one problem that Morbius finds is that he is becoming a vampire-like creature himself, and he is wreaking havoc on lots of different people and in some cases property. So he is trying to deter him from taking this cure and becoming a monster as well. This is certainly not a terrible movie by any means, or at least not as terrible as critics are trying to play it out to be. There are definitely some moments of this film that I really enjoyed, that I thought were really well set up and directed. At least if you can get around the CGI that looks like it came straight out of the early 2000s. But aside from that, there was some pretty good direction in many different action sequences, especially one in particular that revolved around Morbius flying through a subway and fighting one of the main villains, which I don't want to talk too much about due to spoilers, but I thought it was really well set up because it was pretty much just a straight tracking shot. It was very easy to follow, and it flowed seamlessly throughout the entire scene. I thought that was really good. There's also a pretty great scene where it was just Morbius going through and testing his powers and just seeing what he could do as far as his senses go and how he was able to go through and do what he does. And you also get some pretty immersive audio and shots of exactly what he can sense. And I think that was very clever and well set up, and I found that very entertaining as well. I think the leading cast of this movie was just about perfect. I really loved Jared Leto as the character of Morbius. I think he gave just about the right level of humanity and tragedy to his character and really making you sympathize with him, but also giving quite a dark story to his inner conflict, or as much of an inner conflict as there is in this movie. And I think Matt Smith is very good as his best friend Milo. They both have really good chemistry together. They play well off of each other. And Matt Smith is just a very dark and twisted actor for the role as well. I think he fits into the latter portion of the film. I also really liked seeing Tyrese Gibson as the leading FBI agent in this movie as well, even though he didn't really get as much screen time in this movie as the trailer would like you to believe. But that is just about it as far as positives go. This film is an absolute mess of a screenplay. It tries to rush through so many different plot points and story elements that are supposed to make you care more about the characters and the story as a whole, but they just don't give enough detail and enough care to the backstory to actually make you care for the characters or really make you care for the story at play. They could have done so much more with the childhood element of Morbius's character and actually showing more of how he was really intelligent and how he managed to become a really great doctor, but also giving more tragedy and more empathy towards his condition and what made it so tragic. Of course, it was the obvious thing of he was going to have a shortened lifespan, but they didn't really flesh out the story enough to make it something truly tragic and deepening. Now, the biggest thing about the marketing of this film is with the trailers, they were trying to make it look like it was going to be a film about Morbius becoming an anti-hero and having a true inner conflict with who he was killing or what he was doing across the city and how he was actually making an impact, which could have been really great if it was actually explored in this film. But it wasn't. They literally just said, okay, we're going to start this inner conflict and have him kill some people and maybe do some reckless things, and then just ignore that that happened and have a bigger villain to take over the rest of the story and make him a hero now. And it just felt so rushed and like they were trying to shift away from their initial focus, and that just messed it up entirely for me. I also didn't understand why this movie needed to be crunched down to such a short runtime of 1 hour and 45 minutes when there are so many recent Marvel movies that have been able to flesh out new characters and bring them really brilliant backstories with runtimes of well over 2 hours. And it felt like they were really just trying to crunch it down, either because of some crazy studio mandate or the multiple delays it went through. I don't know the exact reason, but it just felt unnecessary and like they were just trying to rush the story further. It's incredibly disappointing seeing so many Marvel movies give such great characters in the comics new backstories and giving them a time to shine in the cinematic universe, like Shang-Chi, Black Panther, and many others that weren't as well known beforehand, but are now being made crucial parts of the Marvel Universe, and going from that to now a character who has so much potential to be a very dark and great anti-hero and even possibly villain in the entire cinematic universe, and just giving him such a convoluted and terrible backstory, or at least one that's very rushed within the screenplay. This film overall has a great cast and some really entertaining sequences or smaller scenes at its disposal, but it just falls under such an incohesive and rushed story, and I just can't find myself getting around that. And it really ruined my experience of watching this movie, but it wasn't the worst, I will say. I don't think it was the most terrible thing Marvel has put out by any means. So I will give it an overall D. Even despite my disappointment with this film, I'm still very excited to see what else Marvel decides to put out, especially with Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness coming out in May. I am very excited to see that film in particular, but overall, thank you guys for watching. Really hope you enjoyed this review, and I will see you in the next one.